Welcome to the Reach Podcast with your teacher, Pastor Taylor Gabbert.
There's, two kinds of people when it comes to where you put your things and how you find your things when you're looking for stuff. There's people who think that everything has a place. Okay? Everything I have has a place, and it goes in that place. And then there are people where every place is for everything or anything. Really, wherever they're standing, when they're done with the item in their hands, that's where it goes. Right? It's interesting, we'll go, Christmas, we'll go over to my parents' house, and you can really see the difference between me and my brother-in-law, the one that lives in Texas, because you can always know where my stuff is because it's grouped together. Where I've picked a spot in the house, and all of my things that I brought over or get that day, they go in that same spot, and they just stay together. Meanwhile, he's like, I'm done with my glasses, so they go here. And then he's like, and I'm done with my cell phone, so that goes here. And then inevitably, he leaves something behind because, I don't know, it just found a new home, I guess. Right? And I can't fathom that. But one of the things I realize is it's actually worse for me when something's lost. See, because if you're the other kind of person where just kind of wherever you put stuff, nothing's ever really lost. You're just looking for the last place you decided it belonged. Me, when I go to the place where something should be and it's not there, it is lost. Now I'm on a hunt. I got to find that thing because it is not where it's supposed to be. Something is lost when it's not where it's supposed to be and you don't know where it is. Right? I heard a guy on a movie recently said, well, I never could find God. And the other guy said, well, that's because God wasn't lost. Right? See, when we can't find God, God's not the one missing. God's not the one in the wrong place. You're the one that's misplaced in that moment. You're the one that's not where you're supposed to be. Some of you, I probably won't, but some of you are probably going to spend time with little kids looking for Easter eggs this week, right? Now, the thing about Easter eggs is that none of them are where they're supposed to be. I think that's why we paint them, so they stand out more. I'm not sure. I really don't know what the deal with Easter eggs is. They look like they were stolen from the birds in Dr. Seuss books. And they were definitely stolen because that bunny didn't lay them. So, he's stealing those eggs, right? So, the thing is that we're going to scatter those, and then mostly little children, right? They're going to go search for these eggs. But in a sense, they're still finding something where they think it should be, right? That's the idea. What was the problem with that Passover day, or that, I'm sorry, not Passover, that Easter Sunday? Jesus is not in the tomb, and they meet him, right? They see him face to face, and they don't recognize him. Why? Because they were looking for him in a place where they thought he should be, but he wasn't there. So even though they found him, they didn't find him where they were looking for him, and so they didn't recognize him. There's more to it than just that, but that's one of the factors. You ever seen somebody, you have a coworker, you only ever see them at work, and then you see them, at church, and you're like, who are you? Because they're out of place. They're not where you want them to be. You're not looking for them in that place. See, there's a question in the Old Testament. The question in the Old Testament that the Israelites were asking was, where can God be seen? See, they were looking for this Messiah. They were looking for this person that they had been promised, and they were trying to figure out where he was, when he was coming, where they were going to find him, where they could see God, right? And so they were looking for him, and we often have that same question. Oftentimes in our lives when we're going through things and stuff doesn't make sense and we're getting overwhelmed, we say, well, where's God? Why can't I see him? Why can't I hear from him? See, the beautiful thing is that answer the question in the Old Testament is answered in the New Testament. Where can God be seen? He can be seen in the person of Jesus Christ. And it gets even easier because they had Jesus, right? But in the same way that they had Jesus, they couldn't access him whenever they wanted. But we have the Word of God, and we can always access Jesus. So we can always peer at Jesus and see God. We can find him if we just know where to look for him. We've been in a series on Psalms. Matt has been teaching through the Psalms. It's a 10-part series. He did 5 already. And what we're going to do over the next 3 weeks, kind of like an intermission, but it fits, is we're going to look at 2 specific Psalms. See, there are 2 specific Psalms that David writes about one event in his life. And what we're going to do is tonight, we're going to look at that event in David's life in 2 Samuel. And then over the next 2 weeks, we're going to kind of continue this Psalm series, but we're going to continue it with, fresh in our minds, the story of what happened in 2 Samuel and why David writes these Psalms. And I want you to see, because a lot of times when we read the Psalms, they're kind of abstract. They're poems, but they're not connected to something tangible, something you can feel and see, oh, this connects. And what we're going to see is that David was going through something. He was going through something really dark and bad, and he was in a low place, and that's when he penned these words. And then I want that when you read those Psalms, it is seared into your mind what David was experiencing when by the power of the Holy Spirit, he first wrote those words. And you're going to have that context. So even though tonight we're not specifically in a psalm, this is an intermission that kind of fits with this 10-part psalm series that Matt is doing. So starting tonight, we're going to look at this event in 2 Samuel, but we need to understand some of the context of what's happening in 1 and 2 Samuel. And to be clear, I'm going to back up all the way to Genesis, and we're going to give just a broad summary of how we get from Genesis to 1 and 2 Samuel, because a lot of times when we read the Old Testament, it's just a bunch of disjointed stories about this one people group. We're like, yeah, more Israel stuff. Here they were. And then we just kind of jump from like creation, there's all this stuff about Israel, and then Jesus is here. And we don't really understand why we have the books we have. And so as we look at what's happening in 2 Samuel, I want you to understand how we got there. Okay, so we have Genesis. We have the creation and the fall. And what happens there is that God spent all this time and energy building a place where we could be with him, and immediately we forfeited that. We lost it. Okay, so we now have a problem. We're divided from God, right? And he immediately promises that he will make a way for that to be fixed. He says, okay, I knew this was coming. There's a divide, but I'm going to fix it. And I'm going to fix it by sending you a man, a Messiah, a Christ, and he's going to repair the broken relationship we have. And so immediately, humans have a promise of redemption from God that is held in the seed of Eve, this promised person. That is who they begin looking for. And the story of Genesis is really the promise of this person marching through, against all odds, through human history, never being choked out, not by the flood, not by the Tower of Babel, not by humanity's evil, not by the stupid decisions of even the good guys in the story. And so you get all the way to the end of Genesis, and you're left with this family that is going to start the Israelite nation. So you get into Exodus and Joshua, or Exodus through Joshua, and in Exodus through Joshua, you have the birth of the nation of Israel all the way to its conquest of the land, right? And there is just all kinds of chaos in those books. You should definitely read them if you haven't. It's a great time, all right? And so you have the Israelites. They go all the way from the exodus of leaving Egypt in slavery. They conquer the land in Joshua, and then you get into Judges. Now, here's the thing. When you leave off in Joshua, everything's looking pretty good. You're kind of like, okay, all right, it's been bumpy, but we're here. We've conquered the promised land. Now we just need this guy, this Messiah to show up, and we'll be golden. We've already got the land. Everything's looking up. And then you enter into this period of the Judges where there's no king in Israel. That's the point of what's happening in Judges, that there's no king in Israel. Well, we have to understand what that means. Samuel, the last judge and first prophet, is probably writing the book of Judges, and he's trying to make a point. The king of Israel was supposed to be God himself. But the people acted like they didn't have a king for so long, and things went so poorly that they ended up needing a physical king. Now, you got to understand that's a trade down. They should have had God as king, but because they couldn't figure that out, God gave them Saul as king. And Saul, it doesn't do a great job. Okay, so here's the thing about Saul, though. He's their first attempt at a human king, and Saul is the perfect choice for king according to the world's metrics, right? Tall, handsome, brave. He's everything you want in a king, except nothing in any of the places where it matters. That's who they get in Saul. So you have this story being written of why Judges is, why did we get to a king? And then in Samuel, the explanation, the first part of the explanation is, why did we move from that king to the Davidic king? Why did we go from Saul to David? Because that's not father to son right there. And then the second part of the explanation is, who's David? Who is David? What part does he play? And here's what's happening in the book of 1st and 2nd Samuel. David is the closest look at who the Messiah was supposed to be of anybody in the entire Old Testament. You can almost feel the nation of Israel holding their breath and going, is it him? Is he here? Do we finally have the Messiah, the one we've been promised? And then you get to this story. And in this story, all the hopes and all the dreams of maybe this is the Messiah, they come crashing down. They get smashed. See, because the people were still looking for the Messiah in the wrong place. And as close as David got, he was just one of us. He still failed. He still couldn't cut it. And then we had to go back to the question, okay, where's the Messiah? Where is he? How do we find him? We're still looking for that righteous king. See, because what we're going to see today in this story with David is that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, even David. So the first thing I want you to see is I want you to see the elements of the sin cycle common to all of us. So look with me at 2 Samuel chapter 11, starting in verse 1. Then it happened in the spring, at the time when kings go out to battle, that David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel, and they brought destruction on the sons of Ammon and besieged Rabbah, but David stayed in Jerusalem. Now at the evening time, David got up from his bed and walked around on the roof of the king's house, and from the roof he saw a woman bathing. And the woman was very beautiful in appearance. So David sent servants and inquired about the woman. And someone said, is this not Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? Then David sent messengers and had her brought, and when she came to him, he slept with her. And when she had purified herself from her uncleanness, she returned to her house. But the woman conceived, so she sent word and informed David and said, I am pregnant. Okay, so the first thing I want you to see, I've talked to you guys about this a lot, and this is one of the pinnacle stories for this lesson. We want to think that every decision we're going to make in life is simply this. Is it a sin or is it not a sin? Am I doing the wrong thing or am I doing the right thing? Right? And every single time that we determine in our head the decision I'm making is not inherently a sin, we go, well, then it must be the right decision. Must not be a problem. I guess I can do it. I'm totally free to do it because it's not a sin. The problem is that's not the only decisions we make in life. Some decisions are not about what's sin and what's not sin. Some decisions are about what's wise and what's unwise. And here's the thing. If you are making a sin and not sin decision, that's it. You're either sinning or you're not sinning. But if you are making a wise and unwise decision, do you know what is right around the corner if you choose the unwise choice? The sin, not sin decision. Right? It's one turn. You're like, unwise choice. And here's the sin, not sin decision. It's right there. It's in your face. So what's happening here? David is not inherently doing something sinful. He's doing something unwise. And because he's not where he's supposed to be, he is immediately faced with a sin or not sin decision that he would never have been faced with if he had just been where he was supposed to be. This is the story of like 90% of our sin. Now, I get it. Sometimes sin creeps up on you, and it just gets you, right? It ambushes you. But a lot of the time, that sin wouldn't even be able to ambush you if you were where you were supposed to be. Think about your routine. Most of you have experienced this. When are you most likely to make the dumbest decision of your week? Saturday. Why? Because Saturday is the day that you slept in, didn't have a quiet time, ate breakfast around 11, right? That's the day you're the most stupid. Because that's the day you don't have any routine. You're not where you're supposed to be. You're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. I ask people this all the time. I say, who owns your time when you're at work? I say, my boss does. Okay. Who owns your time when you're at school? Well, my teacher does. Okay, well, who owns your time when you go to church? Well, the pastor does. Well, who owns your time on Saturday? And they're like, that's my time. You were actually wrong about every single one of those answers. God owns your time every second of the day. Now, he may have delegated some of that authority. He may have said, you know what? My time that I'm giving you, it's going to go to your boss right here. And my time that I'm giving you, it's going to go to your teacher right here. But Saturday is not your day to go, my time. Have you ever asked yourself, God, not yourself. Have you ever asked God, what do you want me to do tomorrow? What do you want me to do on this Saturday? How do you want me to spend my Saturday? Right? And I'm not saying you can't rest. I'm not saying you can't get an extra hour. I'm saying stop being so lazy and apathetic that you immediately fall into sin almost as soon as you open your eyes. Right? Because you make that wise, unwise choice, and then there it is, sin. And I don't want you to miss this. David is not just not where he's supposed to be, but it says, now at the evening time, David got up from his bed. I mean, it's like the classic teenager moment. He slept all the way to dinner. He finally gets out of bed. He's supposed to be off at war. He's not where he's supposed to be. And then he decides, I'll take a stroll around the roof. Right? And then he sees temptation. He has made every wrong decision leading up to this moment where it can finally ambush him, where it can finally get in his face. Now, at this point, David, he sees this woman, and he invites her to come to his house. Now, I think he already knew what he was about to do, but let's just, for a second, let's just entertain that maybe he thought, I'm just going to have her over for dinner. We're just going to have a conversation. I just want to get to know her, right? That's it, right? Here's the deal. You are not strong enough to fight temptation on your own. And the closer you get to it, the more likely you are to fail, right? What does this look like for you in our day and age? How about 2 a.m. on the couch watching a movie under the blankets with nobody else in the room? Does that ever work out for anybody? And any of you ever been so strong-willed that wasn't a temptation moment for you and your significant other? It's just stupid. It's like taking a nap next to a bear trap that's set and being like, I just won't roll over. It'll be fine. I'll be good. You will always get caught. David, I don't know if he knew he was going to sin. I think he did. I think we do. I think we get right up on the line because we're like, well, if I don't acknowledge it until the moment I trip over it, then I can say it was an accident. Have any of you ever actually convinced yourself that you didn't participate in your sin? I haven't been able to do it. I honestly have not been able to do it. Every time I sin, I'm like, yeah, I was there for that. I was on board. Like I went with it all the way to I can't convince myself that I'm not there for it. So I can't convince myself that if I really was engaged, I would have just resisted it. I'm always there. I'm always giving in. That is what's happening with David right now. He's not strong enough. And then in verse 5, we see the consequences. He gets the worst text message you can possibly get. I'm pregnant. It's worse in this context anyway. You know what wisdom is? Wisdom is thinking ahead. I mean, did David not know that this was like a potential consequence of this action? Of course he did. He didn't think ahead. He didn't have any wisdom to think maybe there's a consequence to this action. I tell a lot of the guys that I work with, many of you have heard me say, quit falling backwards into stuff. Like, you're not stupid. Like, again, you make that decision to watch that movie late at night with your girlfriend. You know where you're headed. You know what you're doing. Quit falling backwards. Well, we messed up again. Oh, of course you did. Is that a surprise to you? Quit leading yourself into that stupid moment. Quit falling backwards into it. That's what David is doing right here. This isn't the behavior of the Messiah. This isn't who he was supposed to be, who he was expected to be. This is just how everybody acts. This is just how we all act all the time. And then he's going to do exactly what we do next. He's going to try to handle it. He's going to try to solve the problem, handle it completely on his own, and fix everything. Why is confession the same thing as humility? Why is confession, why do I always tell you, if you want to live humbly, if you want to receive the grace that comes to the humble, if you want to fight pride, you have to live in confession, you have to live in the light. Why is that? Because shedding light on your sin, living in vulnerable confession is humiliating. That's what humility is. Right? Pride is when I don't want to be humiliated, I don't want to be uncomfortable, I'm not going to let anybody see what's actually going on. I'm not going to let anybody see what's happening behind the curtain. Pride is really just trying to convince everybody else that I'm not who I really am. It's even trying to convince yourself. The reason I can't tell you that I have sin in my life is because I don't want to think about the fact that I have sin in my life. I don't want to admit it to me, much less you. That's what pride is. Humility instead is telling everyone, I'm a sinner, covered in it, and thank God that Jesus covered me in his blood to take that away. That is humility. It's not getting out of being the sinner. It's understanding that God is taking care of that sin. Look at verse 6. Then David sent word to Joab, send me Uriah the Hittite. So Joab sent Uriah to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked about Joab's well-being and that of the people and the condition of the war. Then David said to Uriah, "Go down to your house and wash your feet." So Uriah left the king's house, and a gift from the king was sent after him. But Uriah slept at the door of the king's house with all of the servants of the Lord and did not go down to his house. Now when they informed David, saying Uriah did not go down to his house, David said to Uriah, "Did you not come from a journey? Why did you not go down to your house?" And Uriah said to David, "The ark of Israel and of Judah are staying in temporary shelters, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are camping in the open field. Should I then go to my house and eat and drink and sleep with my wife? By your life and the life of your soul, I will not do this thing." Then David said to Uriah, "Stay here today also, and tomorrow I will let you go back." So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the day after. Now David summoned Uriah, and he ate and drank in his presence, and he made Uriah drunk. And in the evening, Uriah went out to lie in his bed with his Lord's servants, and he still did not go down to his house. Okay, what's happening here? David's brilliant plan is not working. See, David's like, okay, she's pregnant, but if her husband comes and sleeps with her, then he'll just think it's his kid, and nobody will have to know, right? But the problem is Uriah is not just a great guy, but he's a man's man. He's a man that says, I can't go take the comforts of being home on vacation while my brothers are in the field fighting the war. I'm not where I'm supposed to be. See, that's the behavior the king was supposed to have right now. And Uriah says, no, I can't be there. I'm not supposed to be there. I'm supposed to be at war. And so then David goes for round two. He's like, maybe if I get him drunk. And so he gives him a bunch of drinks, and they have a great time. And even in that condition, Uriah won't go home and be with his wife. David's brilliant plan is falling through. See, your brilliant plan to save yourself, it will never be sufficient. If you want evidence that David isn't the Messiah, you can examine this story. I mean, you can see what's coming. We've already got adultery, right? We know what's coming next. But we actually don't have to go much further than just looking at how hard David is trying to fake out this genuinely good guy to cover his own tracks. This is not the way the king is supposed to behave. Look at verse 14. So in the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah. He had written in the letter the following: "Station Uriah in front of the line of the fiercest battle and pull back from him so that he may be struck and killed." So it was as Joab kept watch on the city that he stationed Uriah at the place where he knew there were valiant men. And the men of the city went out and fought against Joab, and some of the people among David's servants fell, and Uriah the Hittite also died. Look at how far David has fallen. I want you to understand, just so you don't miss it, he wrote a letter condemning this man to death, a murder, and he put the letter in that man's hands, and he sent it with him. He made him the delivery person for his own death. Think about this. David is supposed to be a type pointing you to Jesus. Does that even remotely remind you of Jesus? See, Jesus instead, he took the death warrant out of your hands and he put it on himself. And he delivered himself into death. He didn't condemn you to death to save his own hide. Listen, your sin isn't content to just live in the quiet places that you think you've kept it. It doesn't stay hidden in the closets. It doesn't stay unknown. It doesn't get deleted with your browser history. It wants to kill you. And it doesn't just want to kill you, it wants to kill everybody around you. It wants to kill your families and your relationships. It wants to kill your futures. See, God says, I have a future for you and a hope. Your sin, it doesn't have a future for you or a hope. It only pays you in death. It only tries to take life. You can't contain it. It will grow. I want you to see this. David sacrificed this man to save his own pride. Jesus not only sacrificed himself for you, but he gave up heavenly glory to do it. See, David is protecting his image. He's got to look kingly. Jesus came from the most kingly he had ever been so he could be completely humiliated. Now, let's just take this in parts. He's humiliated part one because he went from God to human. Nothing else had to happen. That's humiliating. God, infinite, powerful, all-knowing God, to finite baby in a barn. Already humiliated. Then he lived as nobody to be mocked, beaten, and brutally murdered. These are polar opposites. David is proving to us that he wasn't it, that he couldn't be it, that he didn't have what it took. And here's the thing. David, he came a lot closer to looking like Jesus than you or I ever will. If David couldn't do it, you can't. You don't have what it takes. You can't close that gap. You need a Messiah who will. Now, because of David's actions, we're going to now see him govern not like the heavenly king that he's supposed to be mimicking and looking like. We're going to see him govern just like an earthly king. I want you to understand, you may not be aware of this because our society's done a pretty good job of, at the very least, hiding it, if not eliminating a lot of it. But in most of human history, everything around you operated on some form of corruption. I mean, there's bribes and corruption in all of human history, even in most of the world to this day, and more around us in our own country, okay? To whatever extent is not the point. The point is that is most of human existence. Politics, bribery, corruption, coercion, that's just what it is. The thing is, you can't bribe, coerce, politic in the heavenly courts. You can't pay off that king, partially because you don't have you don't have the money. Like you don't have what it would take. And because the heavenly king rules with complete purity. He can't be bribed, he can't be bought off. His favor can't be earned. It can only be given. He gives it, but you can't find a way to get it. Look at verse 18. Then Joab sent a messenger and reported to David all the events of the war. He ordered the messenger, saying, "When you have finished telling all the events of the war to the king, then it shall be that if the king's wrath rises and he says to you, 'Why did you move against the city to fight? Did you not know that they would shoot from the wall? Who struck Abimelech, the son of Jerubasheth? Did a woman not throw an upper millstone on him from the wall so that he died at Thebez? Why did you move against the wall? Then you shall say, your servant Uriah the Hittite also died. So the messenger departed and came and reported to David everything that Joab had sent him to tell. The messenger said to David, the men prevailed against us and came out against us in the field, but we pressed them as far as the entrance of the gate. Also the archers shot at your servants from the wall, so some of the king's servants died, and your servant Uriah the Hittite also died. Then David said to the messenger, this is what you shall say to Joab. Do not let this thing displease you, for the sword devours one as well as another. Fight with determination against the city and overthrow it, and thereby encourage him. Okay, I want you to see what's happening here. I don't think I've ever really processed what's happening here. I think I've always misread this passage. What's going on is that unrelated to this plan with killing Uriah the Hittite, there's been a tactical error in the battle, right? They got in a fight, and they did something dumb. They let their infantry soldiers get too close to the wall, and a bunch of archers from the enemy city killed a bunch of them, okay? This was a tactical error, and the general, Joab, he's aware of this. He knows that they made a mistake, but he's got a bargaining chip. He has done something recently that should have bought him favor with the king. So all he needs to do when he starts getting in trouble for the fact that they made this tactical mistake is remind the king, hey, but I did that thing you wanted me to do, so you should be happy with me, right? Here's the thing. When you get right before the throne of grace on Judgment Day, and Jesus is determining whether you're his or not, where you're finding out, and the devil lists all your sins and says, this is who you were in your life. Are you going to be able to look at Jesus and go, yeah, but I did that thing for you? Right? Remember that thing that you asked me to do? I did that thing. No, there's nothing. There's no good work. There's no bribe. There's no action. There's nothing you're going to do that's going to get you the inside track with Jesus, where he's going to go, well, I was going to send you to hell, but you did that thing. That's not going to happen. That only happens in earthly courts. That only happens with corrupted people. See, in this moment, David is rightfully mad, acting as the king should. He reacts and says, why did you guys make this mistake that got people killed? And the messenger says, you're right, Uriah the Hittite died as well. And then all of a sudden David goes, well, some people die in war. I guess that's... What? He completely shifts. He's been bought off because he's not concerned with the heavenly matters. He's not concerned with what truly matters in this moment. He's concerned with himself. He's just happy that his sin's been covered up, that he got away with his crime, that he hasn't been found out. He erases justice. He erases true love. And he does it to save himself, to cover up for himself. Look at verse 26. Now when Uriah's wife heard that her husband Uriah was dead, she mourned for her husband. When the time of mourning was over, David sent servants and had her brought to his house, and she became his wife, and she bore him a son. But the thing that David had done was evil in the sight of the Lord. God looked at Jesus and said, this is my son in whom I am pleased. Jesus never did anything that was evil in the sight of the Lord. Now, I could stop there because it's pretty blatant, but the problem is if you just read verse 27, you see that the Lord's unhappy, but you don't actually see that David's unhappy. It kind of looks like David got away with it. If you knew nothing else, if you didn't continue the story, and we will cover the rest of what happens in Samuel as we go through the Psalms, but if you didn't know anything else, you could stop right there and go, I don't know. They say crime doesn't pay, but it seems like David's doing okay at this point. I want you to see this. Psalms 32 is the psalm that David is going to write way later, way after this affair. It's the one when he's looking back and he's considering everything that has happened, he's going to pen Psalm 32. And I just want to read these two verses from Psalm 32 because I'm convinced that these two verses, verse 3 and verse 4, is David thinking about that moment at the end of chapter 11. When I kept silent about my sin, my body wasted away through my groaning all day long. For day and night your hand was heavy on me. My vitality failed as with the dry heat of summer. I want you to understand, there is no such thing as joy or peace or happiness outside of following the Lord. There's no amount of money. There's no amount of fame, influence, power, wealth. There's no amount of sex. There's no amount of excitement, adventure. There is nothing on this earth that can fulfill you if you are not walking with the Lord, if you are in rebellion. When you sin in the darkness and you pin that sin up inside of you and you hide it, it will eat you from the inside out. And you can ignore it for quite some time. As a matter of fact, most of our sin is designed to numb the feeling of rotting that's happening. There's a point, think about it like this. You get a headache, you take some Tylenol, and what does it do? It kills a headache. You ever had a headache Tylenol won't kill? There's a point where your sin won't numb that rotting feeling. It is so intense, and it's so terrible. There's no medication that will ever take it away except that it has to be healed. David was not happy at the end of chapter 11. He had hidden his sin. He had gotten away with the crime up to this point, but he is miserable. He is writhing in despair. I want you to understand something. So many times in my life, I have sat in that spot, in that despair. I have hated myself, my actions, my life. And I thought, I don't know what to do with this. Only to look back now and go, there's only one thing to do with that. And it's to take it to the Messiah, to the King. And here's the thing. You need a Messiah. You need a Savior, right? You can't be it in your own life. And I started this entire sermon by talking about David not being where he was supposed to be. Here's the thing. More than the murder, more than the adultery, the thing that shows me that David couldn't cut it as the Messiah is because he wasn't where he was supposed to be. Because do you know what I desperately, desperately need? A Messiah who is always where he says he'll be. That is totally reliable. That every single time I go to find him, he's exactly where he's supposed to be. I want you to understand that Jesus told us that he was going to go sit right next to the Father. And for the rest of our lives, he was going to intercede on our behalf. And if he ever takes a day off, we are in so much trouble. And that's why I need Jesus to be the Messiah, because he will never not be where he's supposed to be. And I will never not be able to find him, Because every time I go to where he's supposed to be, he will be there. And I don't have to look any further, and I don't have to spend any more time being lost to that. He's always where he said he will be. And the thing is, every time I can't find him, it's because I'm the one that's lost. It's because I'm the one that's not in the right place. Sometimes I can't even figure out how to get back there, right? Like, you ever been so lost, you're like, I don't even know where to start. Well, how do I can't find anything because I don't even know where I am. Here's the beautiful thing. I say this to you guys all the time. The gospel is that he came to get you. When you're lost, when you can't figure out where he is because you don't know where you are, that's fine. Sit down and say, God, I need you to come get me. I need the gospel in my life because if you don't come get me, I got nothing. I'm that lost. And he will always come get you. He will always come find you. He will always bring you the gospel. He will always save you. God is not only able to save you in eternity, he wants to save you every single day of your life. Here's the thing, where's the Messiah? He's not in a tomb. He's not buried. I just traveled all over Greece and in Rome, and I saw all these crucifixes with Jesus still on them. He's not there. That's not where he's supposed to be. He's sitting by the Father, and he's telling the Father about me, that I'm his. He's always dependable, and he's always sufficient. This week, you're going to hear a lot about this empty tomb. And I want you to think, when you hear about that tomb, that wasn't where he was supposed to be. That's why he's not there. We're going to come back in a week, and we're going to go over Psalm 51, and we're going to see the moments of despair that David is going to live in because of this event, the anguish that he's going to feel. And this week, I want you to go out and I want you to think, am I looking for the Messiah where he says that he'll be?
This is Matt O'Mealy, pastor to young adults at Evergreen Baptist Church. I want to invite you to come to Reach. We meet every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. at Evergreen in South Tulsa, just east of Mingo on 111th Street. The mission of Reach Tulsa is to cultivate a young adult community that is defined by real transformation and the sincere pursuit of a godly life through training in biblical disciplines, personal development, and intentionally transitioning into independence as mature members of the body of Christ. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like and subscribe to our content. We are available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Reach Young Adult Ministry is a part of Evergreen Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma. For more information and additional lessons, please visit our website, evergreenbc.org.